G'day friends and fans. Today Talk Stuff Ukraine War update for the 14th of December. Now I'm just checking my sound volume. It says alright. Well, it says I got sound. I can hear it. But never know. Some people, you never know. I keep having just these little glitches every day. Sometimes they're noticeable. Sometimes a few notice. Sometimes only I notice. It's weird. The frame rate going down again. Shouldn't matter. I'm trying to swap. Here we go. It's loading. It's wow. It's really noticeable that it's not loading. Let me try again. There we go. Now the Ukrainian interactive map tells us most battles. These are the reported engagements by the Ukrainian is it Ministry of Defense? No, it's the SBU, but yeah, the Ukrainian secret police vet everything, but they don't tell you what was struck. Though there were violent explosions in parts of Ukraine, including Odessa. There was a body swap today. Poland, had packet. Was it Poland? Yeah, Poland had a suspicious package found on the border crossing. Attacks. Most attacks on Ukrainian personnel and political figures go unreported. There's a lot of infighting in Ukraine at the moment. Zelensky's faction is trying to crush the opposition, and the opposition is trying to undermine Zelensky's authority and force a vote on ending this war, which he refuses because he's sitting at less than 10% popularity, allegedly. Some have him high as 37. But still, if an election was held today, Ukraine would not only vote out Zelensky in most of the Duma, but they would end the war quite happily if it was a static front. Or maybe Russia ceded some territory, not much, but what you would say, Ukraine is willing to give up Donetsk if everything else remains static and these little pockets here and there are returned to Ukraine. One of the areas where I think they're crying the hardest is Kupiansk. Now, there's been a lot of fighting here in the north. Actually, Russia has made advances, but half of Vozhdezhnsk remains in Ukrainian hands still, after years. But it's a grind. It's to wear down the Ukrainians, not... it's a calculated grind. Now, the Ukrainians were halted in Kupiansk, and the Russians have begun pushing them back. Fighting in around the Lyman area continues. Russia's made a bit of progress in Seversk on the outskirts, not much elsewhere. though fighting continues in many areas. Ukrainians said they're fighting towards Dopanilia. They're actually several miles from Dopanilia. But yeah, I guess they could be technically fighting towards Dopanilia, but they're technically fighting towards other areas as well sooner. This little trap is continuing to draw in Ukrainians while the Russians grind myriad. There's been a little progress, but not much. But it's still progress. But the Russians, they're pushing the Ukrainians out here. Still trying to push the Ukrainians back out here. They are slowly advancing here. They've taken territory here. Still only probing attacks in Hulipol. Although they have destroyed several buildings, they have not taken a foothold in the town. Russians have been seen as far as the centre of town, but they have still retreated back to their lines. We have not heard from the Chechens yet, but they keep saying, one of these days, pow! Right in the kisser. So they're up to something, but we don't know what yet. And I think we'll only know after the fact, when something big goes boom and Zelensky has a brown stain to his pants. But will they attempt hit on his life? I don't see them going into Poland. I mean, allegedly Zelensky's in a bunker in Poland most of the time. They do call him a king without a castle in Ukraine, so you be the judge. Alright, so key events. Lots of places got hit, though damage is sporadic, but the the container port for Odessa yet again was on fire. 2 Turkish ships were allegedly hit. Now there's 11 Turkish nationals between the 2 ships, yet no injuries reported. The ships were not sunk, as previously reported, by Ukraine, not by Russia. Also, the ship sailed today, a few hours ago, and according to the Turks, the ships weren't hit. They were hit by shrapnel when containers, falling debris. So, I would take the Turks' word for it. Okay? They got no reason to lie for Ukraine. They don't like Ukraine. They've told Ukraine under no certain terms to end this war. Now, there were drone attacks all over Ukraine, with as many as 450 alleged and 30 missiles alleged. Yet Ukraine will not say what was hit, although allegedly supplies of electricity and water have been knocked out, and that a significant of households are now without power. Ukraine's navy has accused Russia of using drones to attack another Turkish vessel, which allegedly was carrying sunflower oil to Egypt. Yet none of those again. The Turkish crew, again, 11 on this ship. I think it's about the standard crew for these small freighters, it seems. That no one was hurt, the ship wasn't hurt, and the ship continued its uninterrupted journey. According to the Turkish media, it was the crew witnessed the attack on Odessa port. They weren't involved, they weren't attacked. Now it's also claimed that not 2 but 3 vessels were damaged in separate attacks. Again, this is Turkish media, by the way, and they're not saying that they're saying that they were reported. It's quite a big difference Okay? It's alleged that 3 Turkish vessels were damaged. Turkey's not confirming this. Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant temporarily stopped producing power. It was disconnected from its off-site power. Now, the off-site power is what regulates the nuclear reactor's cooling system. And when it goes offline, the power plant goes into lockdown. Now, this is the big news is negotiations continue without any progress because Macron, Keir Starmer and Merkel 2.0 are now decided that Brussels meeting wasn't enough, that they now have to have a Berlin meeting. After having a London meeting, a Brussels meeting, a Berlin meeting. What's next? A Paris meeting. No matter how many meetings they have, this is the bureaucracy, okay? They are stalling, trying to manufacture consent for war. Okay? No, where you meet doesn't matter. How often you meet doesn't matter. If you cannot do anything other than meet, you are basically useless. You're worse than useless. Okay? And of course, everybody's going around, Trump is Chamberlain. Trump is Chamberlain. You know, like all these stupid talking points. You know what? If your socialist do-gooder Chamberlain had actually got Adolf to not only sign an agreement but honour the agreement, you'd be still crowing about how liberalism works. Now, just so happened Churchill was the only one who said Herr Hitler would not keep his word. And this was based on a 1921 or a 1924 meeting when a young Hitler was at the Paris conference, I think it was 1924, in which he openly stated that delaying, you give your word, make any promise if it gets you to get your enemies to withdraw. And every time, that's what Hitler did. Okay, he's a Marxist. He was a trained Marxist. And now you have all these trained Marxists like Keir Starmer, Merkel 2.0, Ursula always lying, doing the same thing, making promises, but this time they've got a problem. They can't get the Russians to withdraw. Look, we'll take your money, withdraw or we'll take your money. Russia hasn't withdrawn. We'll put more sanctions on you. Russia hasn't withdrawn. We mean it this time. Russia hasn't withdrawn. Russia is calling their bluff. Russia knows exactly where the red line is. Trust me when I say there's a red line. Because we've heard up until 2020 about red lines. Now, they don't want you to know about the red line. They don't want you at ease or at rest, waiting, just checking the news every day to see if the red line's crossed. Now, Belarus, of course, is the mediator in prisoner exchange, and yet again, now apparently some Belarusians working for Ukrainian intelligence and some other POWs were released to now. These were military intelligence. So now we don't know what they gave up in return, because Zelensky is the perpetual liar. Always wants you to think that he and his fellow buffoons here, look at these special operators. They're special, all right? You know what's special about them, don't you? Come on, take a long, hard look. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Brand new equipment, not a mark on them. They don't even have face paint. Come on. Those are brand new uniforms. Bet you Lardass over there has never crawled in the mud. I bet you that none of them have a rifle, sidearm. Come on. Propaganda. Thy name is Zelensky. Okay? It's like all these stage photos. What do you notice? Come on, what do you notice? Yeah, emergency. Ever seen that? These are the cleanest emergency workers ever. And then you notice, wait a minute, shadows? What shadows? There's no shadows. This is all computer generated. These are old photos with new, brand new, spanking new. Like, if you've been fighting a fire, ever fought a fire, there's carbon everywhere on everything. Now, at least the tractors are brand new. It's pretty beat up too, so at least they got that detail right. But its colour scheme and doesn't match, and yeah, the lighting doesn't match. Your eyes are highlighting that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 objects in this photo. Come on, use your object recognition. You can focus just a little bit more. But see, you know what liberalism is, right? Liberalism is doing the least. I believe the party's always white, comrades. Come on. Higher IQ, people. Now, Bert says there's a lot of questions, right? So, Merkel 2.0 wants more talk. Yeah. Right. Delay. But what's going on? Czechoslovakia has said no to more money to Zelensky. Now, political scientists have said that power's a drug for Zelensky. No, really? Sure it's not the marching powder in his nose? Or the fact that power is a drug for every feminist, every liberal, every politician, every narcissist, every criminal ever? Now, Eurosceptics are working on a campaign. Czechoslovakia may be joining the alliance of 4, Hungary, Italy, Poland and Estonia to exit the EU. No, Estonia wants, however, security guarantees from the US, thinking that Europe is not doing enough to protect them. So there is a problem. Europe is, well, I think a lot of Eastern European countries have realised that France has the bestest West parade marches ever, and that the English definitely know how to write good war songs, but they all know how to hide behind America's skirt for the last 30 years. You turn men into effeminate weaklings, you take away their incentive to live. What do we expect? You take away their property, you take away their relationships, you take away their kids, and then turn around and ask them to defend your country, and what do they say? F to you, buddy. You take everything away, and what do you get? You have a crumbling empire because you're just so addicted to just more. Europe is headed towards a disaster because the failure to strategize, cooperate, and distribute resources accordingly. But Russia has taken the advantage yet again to file lawsuits against Euroclear, the Brussels-based bureaucracy, which holds the majority of Russian frozen assets, calling it speculative at best that their value is around 300 billion. Neither side will admit to exactly what's there, how much, what form it takes. But my guess is it's a mixture of bonds, stocks, and gold bars. Now, there are going to be debt notes and loans for the various pipelines. There's going to be gold, which is transferred between vaults and then sold off at a later date. Russia is a modest, I think, gold producer, although a lot of their gold is accumulated in the form of arms sales to India and Africa. Smart move. Always get paid in front. Don't get paid in African currency. Whatever you do, get paid in gold. Something that everybody accuses of France of being meanie-poos for doing, but everybody does it. Okay? Sooner or later, of course, more and more people are looking at Bitcoin as a more volatile, yet they are looking at Bitcoin as a replacement for the euro now. But what they want is something more steady, something that would reflect true value of a reserve asset. Now, they didn't say reserve currency. They're looking at a gold-backed coin. Now, China wants to force the digital yuan onto Africa and Russia, but Russia wants a neutral party, along with India, to actually provide the coin at a stable coin. This is compared to a collection of assets amongst the BRICS nations, which would give the currency a lot better trading value and a guarantee of basically what it is. It's an intermediary for payment only, right? It's the point of a stable coin, that you only pay a transaction fee, right? You buy 100 tons of goods at $1 million. You transfer 1.1 million in assets, the value of the coin, and at the same time, the coins change hands, and you keep and the company takes only its operating costs out of the fund. So you keep a neutral balance in the balance sheet. But when the balance sheet starts to imbalance, the countries withdraw their profits, still keeping the coin at a stable neutral currency between them. Now, it's a 4-tier mechanism where you have the buyer, the seller, the guarantor of payment, and the operator of the stable coin. But such a transfer of currency and systems of currency, the problem is the world is so digitized, and even today, hackers have been able to create networks to hack some of the most powerful computers. So they're looking at whether or not they can do this trade in a more secure environment. And of course, even North Korea has become a victim of its own conspiracy in which North Korea would create its own, would destabilize the rest of the world and keep the rest of the world destabilized to prevent war against North Korea. Now, you don't have to believe, but I am telling you what they believe. North Korea believes that everybody's plotting war against them, and that the only countries they can rely on It's Russia and Brazil and a few others who they deem non-imperialist. Remember, there is actually a North Korea saying, China is a 5,000-year-old enemy. It cannot be forgiven. Whereas America is only a 100-year-old enemy. It may one day be forgiven. So if America creates a stable relationship with North Korea, a neutral relationship with North Korea might actually relax its stance on South Korea. South Korea has been trying to get this through what's called the Sunshine Policy. But South Korea and North Korea have so destabilized each other that there is so much mistrust that the politics is no longer in control of the leadership. Right? The populace of the North and the South just have that much animosity that they are driving instability on the peninsula. Not just internally, but externally. And eventually, it will collapse. Not just the North, but the South. It will all collapse. Simultaneously, they will collapse in on each other, and then it won't be a war to back North Korea. It'll be a war to save what's left of North and South. That you'll see another Korean War, unfortunately, unless the Kim Il-jung and the South Korean leadership can find a way to return to the previous status quo that they'd been working towards until this radical feminist movement, who, by the way, didn't say we want to eliminate South Korean men. They said all Koreans, okay? Not just internally. They want to destroy North. The feminist radicals want to destroy North Korea as well as South Korea. So you have a lot of problems right now in the world beyond the borders of Ukraine. Yet the world wants you to focus on Ukraine, but Trump is pressuring Zelensky to cede land that he believes that the corruption scandal, the collapse of the energy sector in Ukraine, the failing support. Even Politico says that, Zelensky has to get on the ball and start accepting things. Meanwhile, Russian forces continue to advance. Now, Sversk, our stronghold is a stronghold. Most Ukrainian towns are fortresses, but not on the scale that you would see from World War II bunkers. With the let's see, what can I think of? The Zelensky line and the what's the name? I can see it in my mind, the one in France. And what, Hindenburg line. All right, and there's also many attempts, like the Berlin line, with the flak towers. They held out. 3 flak towers held the American army for 3 months. Could you imagine had Stern gotten off it? Now, Stern, of course, had done a deal. Last 6 weeks of the war, sat it out. Instead of halting the American advance, getting a quiet end to the war, no. Stern, like many German generals, had enough of little mustache man's ranting and raving and vile outbursts. I think a lot of people forget that Adolf Hitler is a false name, a public persona, a demon created to give everybody a focus off the rest of the Nazi regime, that in fact it was a cartel of, I think it was 28 men, of which three were never prosecuted. One of those three had completely disappeared. The other two had taken their life. But the majority, they were pretty much, most people, even today, only know the propaganda. Most of the propaganda was about manufacturing consent for a war. And this is what we start to see now, where propaganda is being used to try and manufacture consent for war. Maloney has tried to push Zelensky now. Everybody is realizing that France, Britain and Germany are trying to create a war in Europe to destroy Central Europe because Poland has passed France in GDP, allegedly. Now, I don't know the GDP figures, but I do know Europe is concealing how bad France and Britain are doing. And I hope Poland will wake up and realise that they're trying to manufacture a war to destroy Poland so that France can revive its economy at the expense of your lives. They do not care about anything. Now, Russia recently just liberated another town. They are continuing talks with other countries, as well as Steve Witkoff. Zelensky's in hot water as he tries to avoid elections, but as I said, the Ukrainian opposition, including Valeri in UK, is starting to question whether or not he ever intends to hold elections again. But allegedly, there was a phone call between the two in which Zelensky only showed interest in whether or not Zaluzhny would run against him. He is allegedly making threats against anybody who will run against him. Allegedly. Just like allegedly Zelensky's right-hand man took part in an assassination of the main Ukrainian opposition leader 2 years ago in Spain, with the help of French and Spanish communists. But no, any fire involved in political assassinations? No, never! Spanish Civil War. Look the other way. But one of the reasons why I think there will never be true peace between the West is that Russia continues to back some more questionable countries around the world, such as Venezuela. So, sure, there's plenty of political reasons not to like Putin, but you'll always have to give credit where credit is due. And the main thing is, not Europe, not America. You don't like it when allegedly Russia interferes in your country. So what makes you think you had the right to interfere in theirs if you cannot take even the mildest of criticisms from some Russian trolls who deliberately during the 2016, 2020 and 2024 elections deliberately posted about Donald Trump to provoke you? They admitted it, that they weren't. They had a jolly laugh on YouTube before getting kicked off. Okay? The Russian trolls are national heroes now. They've got Zelensky to admit that he wants to remain president for life. They got recordings of leaders around Europe all admitting they hate the little man, that they would abandon him if they could. So we wonder what blackmail or political pressure is on Starmer, Macron, and Merz. Now, I think, of course, the political pressure is spelt SOROS. What was that? I think I spelled it wrong. George, Nazi. Yes, that's the one. That's how you spell it. Now, I'm not saying they're the original Nazis, but they definitely have Kanazi, Ashkenazi, and the other. They all have Nazi in their names, right? And Hitler was a Nazi. Grandmother was a... And the only... They lied so much about Poland. Remember, they counted so many Polish POWs that were put to death by Russia and Germany, but none of them got war compensation. The war compensation fund was broken up into Pfizer, Nestle, Goldman Sachs, and a few others. Some got a little bit more than others, but the non-Jews got $1,000, even though some of them had been enslaved for years or died in American bombing. So how can you trust the liberal establishment if they're willing to perpetuate lies about one of the world's worst events since the Mongol invasion, or they're lying about 400 years of Islamic invasions of Europe. They're lying about the attempted African invasions of Europe. Heck, they're lying. They won't even teach in history about the Semite invasion and genocide of the Aramites. They won't teach you about Baal or Moloch or any of the other historical figures, religions of the Middle East. Or, most people don't even know there was other religions. So Saudi Arabia was made up of 6 religions that included Christianity before the Islamic wars. Even today, it's still a crime to possess a Bible in Saudi Arabia if you're Saudi. They relaxed the laws for foreigners to some extent, because Saudi Arabia is having to rely increasingly on foreign labour. They are in trouble. They won't say how much trouble, but I think they're in big trouble. But I think there's a few sweet differences, right? I do think, right, that Europe is playing everybody for chumps. I think they are deliberately sabotaging their own economies to watch other economies that were dependent on them crash, hoping that they will dig. It's like a nosedive. They hope they can pull up in time. Let me see. I'm trying to think of the name of the bird. There's this bird. And when it's grabbed it deliberately. I think it's dove, and they'll grab their wings inwards under their body and deliberately fall to drag the hawk down with them, hoping that they'll pull out of that the hawk will release them, or the dove will be able to flip in the nosedive and land and kill the hawk. I was told this story that it's a rare thing, that it's not a natural thing that all birds do, but there are some birds who have done this. Now, whether or not you believe in the tailspin stories, it is called the tailspin, by the way, but that's what some people say, that Europe is in a deliberate tailspin to try and weaken the US position. Not just the US position, but weaken many, including Russia's position. Because Europe has so long been lazy arrogant. Socialism has dragged Europe so far down, right? Europe thought that socialism would see a rise in the working class, a rise in the pride of the working class. It's quite the opposite. The more socialist Europe gets, the more wealth-hungry European women become. Europe doesn't know what to do, so they're crushing the middle class as punishment. They don't want a middle class. To them, the middle class is idle wealth. It is... See, billionaires borrow and constantly borrow to expand, and then they eventually collapse, but they go on a wild ride, right? When they retire, they sell up and someone else starts building their empires. But the middle class are constantly accumulating wealth, and you have also sovereign funds that have accumulated way too much wealth. There isn't enough assets in the world now for speculative traders, okay? This is why they're going after private homes, why they're creating more and more artificial currencies, and why they keep creating wars to burn off assets and wealth. And this is what Ukraine is. It's not just a testing ground for weapons, it's burning the middle class. Okay? Burning the middle class ambitions of being in the stock market, having stable wealth, having a stable income well into retirement, and passing on something to your children so that they have a better start in life than they did. You know, this constant more attitude of more. And Europe, I think, is now in a tailspin because it cannot come up with more. The only way we can come up with more is if we started colonizing other worlds. But we can't do that yet. We can't even colonize Mars. Apparently NASA's asked Elon Musk to give up on that ambition because of technical difficulties, and that it's a one-way trip, and the odds, even at 1 in 99% chance of a mistake wiping out a colony, they reckon the risk is too much, that isolationism would breed contempt, and colonies would break off. As soon as they were created, they would declare independence. You know, this is the problem. These economies want to expand. They don't want to send humanity to expand. They want they want the 23,000 worlds within 125 light years, to be encompassed in this big ball of what it's called, Sheldon's Knot. Basically perpetual trade, perpetual war, perpetual colonization. This is it's a science fiction fantasy, I think it's basically it's an ambition of imperialists to have, empires, but they realize that empires have to rise and fall, so everything is trade rather than wars. But there's going to be limited wars in order to burn off the excess population, so they don't have constant expansion, because if there's constant expansion of the population, they lose control, right? Colonies will break off. Sheldon's Knot. It's not something I come up with. It's based on Asimov. Sheldon was a character in one of his stories. Foundation predicted the rise and fall and the birth and rebirth of civilization, of new galactic empires. Basically, created this system of traders who would basically, every time a civilization fell, they'd stitch it back. The Foundation would come and basically establish a new civilization and bring them back from out of the brink of techno-barbarianism. But the knot, you have to constantly have this rise and fall, So you have to have a system to deal with it perpetually there, and so you have this system of perpetual trade. So instead of having one galactic empire, you pretty much end up with these rising and falling mini-states, never actually fully ever uniting. That will always be a kink in the system that prevents a return to a single empire. And this is what we have. We have an attempt at globalism, yet globalism keeps collapsing. You get 9 out of 10 states uniting against one state, and that is the tyranny of democracy. And thus, empires will constantly rise and fall. They will collapse. Eventually, alliances will distrust each other. India and China will go to war. There'll be always limited wars out there. So if you actually interested and actually pay attention, you'll see that Russia is trying to create a buffer zone slightly bigger, secure its borders against European aggression. And I know I took a long way round of saying that. I'm sorry but I think without context, you missed the mark. So thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it. I know most people tune out after the first 5 minutes, but there are those who don't. And you're the ones who matter. Thank you for your time. Please like, share, subscribe. Please support the channel. Check out my links in the description below. You can support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree. I'm losing my voice. Sorry. I'm also losing my sight. Sorry. Bye for now.